Hello, everyone. Today I wanted to go over a recent interview that IGN Japan did with the Yakuza studio and their leads, where they talked about specifically uh, the Yakuza franchise and Judgment and the studio's games and how they are gaining more traction in the West and what that means for future releases and how they themselves view the franchises, as well as some extra tidbits on the new Yakuza protagonist, who is going to, debut and take over from Kiryu as the main series protagonist, at least as long as the game does well. But first, there was a very interesting, fun comment that I really liked because I really appreciated hearing Nagoshi, the creator of Yakuza, talk about how he feels and perceives the series, what is its strengths and weaknesses, that type of thing. And what I really liked about it is his comparison of Yakuza to a Simon Pegg movie, as he says. And as a big fan of the series, sometimes it's hard to describe because it is all over the place. Tonally, it goes all over the map, which is, I think, what's fun about it. But I really liked the way he's described this. So they asked him, is there anything you'd like Western readers to know about Judgment or the Yakuza series? Nagoshi said, I've been very happy with the reception of Judgment in Japan, and other games by Yakuza Studio tend to be similarly well received overseas, so I think Western fans will enjoy Judgment too. In a way, it's a very game-like game. The story has weight, but it's a video game at heart. Most games tend to be either deadly serious or completely absurd, but to me the thing that unites Yakuza and Judgment is that they contain both of those sides, and that both sides are of equal importance. It's like a Simon Pegg movie, like Hot Fuzz. When I watch a movie like that, I think the quality of the story, the casting, his love for cinema as well as a medium, permeates everything. He doesn't only want to make people laugh. He also wants to show his love for film, and so he puts everything he has into it. For me, my medium is video games, and I want people to get all different kinds of enjoyment out of playing Yakuza and Judgment. I hope players overseas will feel that way when they play our games. And I really like that comment when I read it because it actually, I totally get that comparison. One thing I love about Yakuza is I do enjoy their melodramatic main stories. There are some moments that carry some good emotional weight that have made me feel really sad or really hyped up when they're, going through an action sequence or something. But what also the series is known for, of course, is its very wacky sub-stories where, that turn into comedy sketches at times. And I really thought that was actually a really good comparison with something like Hot Fuzz, where it's like it's a comedy, but it has an interesting story and characters that it focuses on. It's not trying to be silly 100%, but it also is not trying to take itself serious 100%. And that was a really interesting, cool comparison, I thought. But moving on from that, I wanted to take a look at some of the other comments he said about how the series has grown in the West and what their plans are, because Yakuza used to be a series where no one knew if it was getting localized and all that, and now the releases aren't that bad in between. And they had a few comments on that. So IGN asked, over the past few years, Sega has been closing the gap to bring Western releases out sooner. The Western release of Judgment is only about 6 months later than Japan. What is the thinking behind the strategy, and what have been the challenges? It said, fans in the West would always ask Sega, after each Yakuza release, when will you bring this game to our country? In the past, we had to start the localization process after the Japanese version was already complete, which made it impossible to close that gap. With Judgment, we started localizing parts of the game about a year before the Japanese release, so that we were working in parallel, and that helped us reduce that lag to just 6 months. And negotiated, to be honest, in terms of scheduling, a simultaneous worldwide release is actually possible. It's not that difficult, but from a business perspective, the Western market is so big that it takes time to properly forecast the sales data. And to be honest, this is what causes the delay. It just can't be helped. But if Judgment sells well overseas, we will have the data, so that if we do end up making a sequel, it may become possible to consider a simultaneous worldwide release next time. Well, that would be awesome. I just want to put that out there. It's him saying, like, it's actually possible for a game from them to simultaneous worldwide release is kind of crazy because that would be a real turnaround. Like I said, they've improved a lot, but if that actually happened one day where we got like a Yakuza game on day one, like Japan, that would be that'd be something else. But what's important to note is he mentions scheduling because from a business side, and I think that's very relevant. If you look at when Yakuza games and games like that and Judgment, when they come out, they tend to release a lot of games either very, very early or in summer. Like they've had multiple Yakuza games come out in August. Judgment's coming out in June. Yakuza 0 came out in January. And those aren't the most battle-contested months. Whereas in Japan, a Yakuza game or a game like Judgment, it can come out in the holiday as a big title. But putting a game out like that in November with all the kind of Western AAA games just wouldn't make any sense. Like, that is where there's a lot of really big games that try to avoid those release slots to begin with. So a game like this would not really make much sense to release then. You're kind of setting yourself up to lose sales and get lost in the shuffle. Whereas maybe you stand out a little more and people are willing to give you a chance if you release in, June, August, something like that. So I think that is a big part of it, is even if they wanted to, generally they're big holiday games in Japan, and I can't really see them releasing a Yakuza game in the holiday in the West. So there'd always be a built-in delay just by like holding the game back essentially to avoid the a busy contested schedule. They also asked about Judgment getting a dub. IGN asked, Judgment is the first Yakuza studio game since Yakuza 1 to get a fully dubbed voice in the West. What was the reasoning behind that decision, and will future games get the same treatment? Nagoshi said, the Yakuza series has finally reached a point in the West where we have a consistent fan base, even for the older titles, and the games are well received critically, which I'm really happy about. Adding fully localized voice acting was one response to that as a way to give the fans a new way to enjoy our game. And they went on to add, when Sega of America asked whether we could localize the voice for Judgment, we were interested to see whether we could achieve it, but we're also localizing the lip sync, which really felt like a challenge. It's expensive too, but we're doing it. If we hadn't had to change the character of Hamura right at the end, the localization would be mostly finished by now. We're pretty much in QA now. And Nagoshi said, if the voice dub helps to attract even more fans to our games, our motivation will continue to rise and we can make games even better. I can't say much about whether the new Yakuza will be dubbed, but it will be a brand new experience, which means the development costs are higher, so we have to think carefully about how to spread those costs. So, yeah, they mentioned that actually localization would be 100% done if they hadn't had to change the actor that got busted for cocaine. I've covered that story on this channel. I'm sure you've probably heard that little story. And Nagoshi mentioned about whether the new Yakuza game would be dubbed, and he did say that development costs are higher and they have to worry about that, which kind of, to me, sounds like a hint that, hey, we probably won't spend money there. We have to worry about our budget on that one. But nothing is for sure. And one thing for me personally is Judgment being a kind of in-universe spin-off, but focusing on completely different characters, and they would like it to be a separate series. Whether they could have a little crossover at some point, but they would like it to be a separate thing. Being new people and all that, the option of a dub I think is cool there. But in Yakuza, being a continuation of the story, even without Kiryu, I really couldn't imagine playing a Yakuza game in English, personally. So, and I do feel like because you're going to see more relevant tie-ins. Even if it doesn't focus on Kiryu, I'm sure there's going to be returning characters as the canon of that series continues, and flipping back and forth between English and Japanese for like returning characters would be really weird. Like I could never hear Goro Majima in English at this point. Like that would be like the travesty here, make me go crazy. So I could see them not worrying as much about English dubs for Yakuza, but maybe continuing with Judgment or their other games that studio will do in the future. They mentioned, going over some other details, they mentioned there are no plans at the moment of Yakuza getting on the Switch. They can't say if Judgment will come to PC or not. And they did ask about the remasters, which is something I wanted to talk about for a second, because they've talked about those games coming to the West, but there's been no actual like official like, hey, Yakuza 3, here's the first of the 3, it's coming. You know, it's been like clear it's going to happen at some point, but they've never actually confirmed it. So IGN asked, you're also bringing more of the older titles to PS4, so that the entire mainline series can be played on Sony's current platform. Yakuza 1 and 2, originally released on PS2, got full remakes dubbed Kiwami, whereas the PS3 versions of 3, 4, and 5 are being remastered instead, improving their HD graphics. What can you tell us about that? They said, we've gained so many new fans of the Yakuza series since the PS4 came out, and they don't necessarily own a PS3, so we brought these games to PS4 so they can play the full series. However, the Kiwami games took a full team about 1 year each to rebuild each game and add new mechanics. If we did the same with 3, 4, and 5, that would be another 3 years, and we prefer to use that time to make entirely new games like Judgment and New Yakuza. So instead we decided to make remasters of those games. He also asked, the Yakuza series was originally devised to appeal to Japanese gamers, and was not expected to sell in the West. However, the games now score highly overseas and build a strong fan base. How do you explain the series' recent Western success? They said, you'll always have things that get lost in translation, and Yakuza could have gone that way. But I think the game was made to such a high standard that it was able to overcome those cultural boundaries. While it is a very local flavor, the players who tried it found a well-made game and began to spread the word. And I actually agree. I think a big part, because that's when I got into Yakuza with Zero, is I think social media. He's talking about, they made a well-made game and people spread the word. I kind of feel like Yakuza is a very good social media game. It has a lot of funny little moments that people started spamming. Like I remember in Yakuza 0, the whole nugget, you can get a chicken to be a business manager and all that. Like people were sharing stuff like that a lot, and the funny, weird stuff, and it seemed to give the game a lot more word of mouth. So I actually think that is what helped the series a lot, is more in the social media age being more prevalent. He was also asked if the Western audience is taken in mind more, and they said no, they just make what they make. They talked a little about the new protagonist, and they said, now that Kazuma Kiryu's story has come to an end, New Yakuza features a new protagonist, Ichiban Kasuga. Do you see a story lasting as long as Kiryu's epic 7-game saga? They said, I'm not sure. We're trying hard to make him a character people enjoy and whom they will want to see more of, but we haven't planned several games ahead, simply that fans will like him enough to want more. And then they mentioned, Kasuga is the polar opposite of Kiryu. They're both strong men, but Kazuma Kiryu is a taciturn person who doesn't speak about without reason. He starts out in a coveted position with the Yakuza, albeit an ill-fated one. He is seen as having a future with the Yakuza, and we see him fall from grace and start a life of hardship. But even then, he has good friends who believe in him. On the other hand, Ichiban starts out with absolutely nothing. He is not respected as a Yakuza. He was born and raised on the streets of Kamurocho. But nobody looks up to Kasuga at all. He has to work his way up from rock bottom. We're aiming for a character who contrasts starkly with Kiryu. I hope players will come to love him. I'll say I don't know if this is true, but one theory I've had about Kasuga, because he does seem so different, is I kind of got the vibe with Majima's popularity, they wanted to make a more crazy main protagonist. Kiryu, I love Kiryu, by the way. He might actually be my favorite video game character ever now at this point. But I kind of think they were like, let's put more of a wild card in the lead, because we can do some really fun, crazy things with that. Because Majima just became hugely popular with Zero and in the remakes. So I do think that's potentially factored into making someone so different. They also mentioned Smash Brothers, by the way. Everyone's always got to throw in a Smash Brothers question. So I'll just cover that real quick. And IGN asked, Sega put Sonic, Bayonetta, and Joker in Super Smash Bros. Any chance Kiryu will make an appearance? Majima would make a great Echo Fighter. And Nagoshi said, I don't think Smash Bros. Director Masahiro Sakurai is interested. If he asked, I'd say yes, but I don't think he wants them. They go, he has characters like Snake in there, though. What about that? And Nagoshi said, nah, that's different. And they said, I think it'd be very interesting to put Kiryu in Smash Brothers. He could pick up a bicycle out of nowhere to whack opponents with. There's so many strong characters in Smash Bros. I wonder whether Kazuma Kiryu could defeat them. So, yeah, I agree. Basically what they're saying, like, they would do it 100%. Nagoshi would sign off on Kiryu or Majima being in the game, but the series has no connection with Nintendo, although that's kind of not been a problem sometimes. But also the series is popular in Japan, but I don't think it's globally popular enough. Persona was niche at one point, but it really broke out. Like, Yakuza's gotten more popular, but it's still like, I don't know. I feel like it's still like a couple million copies behind in terms of, players. So it lacks, the global appeal I think they would want in a character. So yeah, I don't think that's realistic at all. Although honestly, Kiryu would probably be number one character for me that I'm a fan of that I would want in Smash. But yeah, that's like not realistic at all. But everyone has to always ask someone if they make a game, would you want them in Smash? So there you go. Anyway, that is what I wanted to focus on out of that interview. I really recommend you reading the IGN Japan article because I didn't actually go over everything. I tried to cut it down, and this is still going along, this video. But yeah, it's really interesting stuff, and I loved his Simon Pegg comparison because I actually really connect with that and totally see where he's coming from. And it's great to hear that they're noticing the games doing better in the West. Like, they're talking about how the reviews and the critical response is way better, nowadays. How the games are selling better. It's not just kind of like the imagination that more people are into Yakuza now. Like, they acknowledge, like, yeah, these games do pretty good outside of Japan for, their budget. They don't do well in the scale of a normal Western AAA game or something. Obviously, their sales expectations would be completely different. But it's doing well for them. And the fact that they're talking about, they trying to close that gap, and they've got it down to like 6 months, which is respectable. But they're also looking at the potential that they could do a worldwide release. It just isn't always, the release schedule doesn't always time out well. But the fact that they would even consider that is actually really exciting, and it makes me very happy to see that studio doing so much better. I feel like a lot of some of my favorite franchises and series in recent years have really just grown, and these games are doing more successful than they were before, and it's leading to potentially more and more stuff. So that's very exciting. So yeah, that's what I have to say on that for now. Like I said, I'll put the interview in the description below because I do recommend it. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.